and I think there's some truth in this, that it came from an original tweet that seemed to show that most of the members of the IDW were liberal on most issues. And Uri said that just feels wrong. And his idea was that the dividing line now, and I think this is certainly true online and probably started with Gamergate and has kind of developed through then, is that the dividing line now is whether you are pro or anti what you might call social justice activism. Is kind of characterized as social justice warrior thinking. That is now become a big dividing line, hasn't it?
Well, I mean, I think this is very mysterious. I think a lot of us have traditionally had a very positive view of social justice. It's the warrior part, this kind of vigilantism, that we're having none of. I mean, I think all of us are having none of. And the sort of glee with which people are talking about canceling human beings and ruining lives, and really excited about the idea that no platform will be given to relatively moderate positions, as if garden variety country club Republicans or even liberal Democrats are one step away from Joseph Goebbels. I mean, that's the really weird stuff that I don't think anybody has any patience with at all, because it's just not part of adulthood.
Because some people would say that is a caricature, and most people on the left don't believe those things. That there are far more reasonable people to have conversations with that wouldn't kind of degenerate into reason as a tool of the capitalist patriarchy, or that's a caricature of a very small part of the left.
Well, then here's the question. Why is it that this moderate, reasonable left doesn't tell these shrill voices to shut up? They're terrified. The children are wilding, right? The adults are cowering behind their front doors because nobody wants to be doxxed. Nobody wants to find that they're unemployable. Nobody wants to be shamed. Nobody wants to be canceled. Nobody wants to be called out. I mean, look, this is an uninteresting point. It has to do with the fact that what is now fueling journalism is outrage. And there's nothing more outrageous than publishing a story like, I can't be friends with white people anymore, or I divorced my husband because he was white, or do men deserve to be in government at all, or some, if you publish something like that, you get a lot of clicks because it's bananas. It's just, we're going through a business model shift, and the baby boomers are in decline. Their narratives don't work. We've got serious economic problems. We're trying to roll up our sleeves and come to common purpose. We've spent way too much time denigrating anything that smacks of patriotism, as if all patriotism was jingoism. We're deranged, as the developed world has become deranged. The idea that our supposed elites, who are anything but, believe me, I've met them, can't figure out why Brexit passed. They can't figure out why Hillary Clinton lost. Really? You can't figure out why, if you've called every single person who's a restrictionist a xenophobe, which they absolutely aren't. Most people who are restrictionists are xenophilic. It's just based on epithet, fear, terror, shame, misportrayal, and it's endlessly boring.
And Uri said in his article that the big dividing line was on the attitude to structural oppression. And so, for example, do you identify as on the left? Do you believe in structural oppression?
Do I believe that Robert Moses configured New York as a planner in order to keep certain parts of the city from having falling land values, or to keep the races separate? Do I believe that structural oppression exists? Any smart person does. I don't even understand the point.
Well, that was Yuri's point in his article, that the major dividing line at the moment is whether you believe or take into account structural oppression.
No. Yuri's just confused. Yuri's out of his depth, in my opinion. Structural oppression exists. Everybody knows that it exists. I don't think anybody is seriously disputing whether structural oppression exists. We're debating what the degree of structural oppression is. So, as I've frequently pointed out, you have, I think, of the top 100 chess players, 99 of them are male, one of them is female. Do you believe that 100% of that imbalance, based on shares of the population versus shares of the top 100 chess players, is all structural oppression in a game that doesn't seem to know which gender is playing? Well, I'm open to the idea that there's some structural oppression, sure, but do I think that it's 99-1? Like, is chess the most bigoted, the most ferociously backward game in the universe, which is systematically destroying the lives of female hopeful chess players? I don't even know what pathway I could imagine that was taking place through. So I think what we're debating is people who are gleefully claiming that all imbalances are structural oppression if they do not favor particular groups.
And he referred to an Ezra Klein article in the first piece, where Ezra Klein talked about the reactionary right online. And it's an interesting thing to pull apart, because in some ways, and as you've said, that the IDW is in reaction to certain things, which we can argue about whether it should be in reaction to or not. But how does it avoid becoming a purely reactionary movement and not saying, okay, there are certain ideas we need to resist, but there's also a place on the other side of this where we can resolve some of these divisions?
Look, I think this is just a very stark cultural difference. Do you believe that the claims of structural oppression have skyrocketed, in fact, because oppression has never been lower than it is currently, and people who need a high level of oppression in order to continue to claim special privileges are amping up their claims that the only reason that imbalances continue to exist could be structural oppression? If that's your perspective, and I think we've seen this with the Southern Poverty Law Center, that group that many of us have very positive memories of, they've got a brick and mortar presence, they've got a large endowment, and there are very few Klansmen to hunt. So it's probably a matter of political economy that you would expect that they would be looking for enough structural oppression to justify their ongoing commitments and operation. Now, that's one perspective. Another perspective is, gosh, we got rid of all of the ostensible causes of oppression, and look at how imbalanced things continue to be. Ergo, it must be cryptic structural oppression, and we have to, triple our efforts to hunt it out wherever it is. I think that would be closer to the experience of those who disagree with the IDW. And I think that that's a debate that I would be interested in having with people on the other side who subscribe to the same rules of debate I do. I think one of the places where this has gotten entirely bizarre is that many of us are encountering the claim that reason itself and civility itself are tools of oppression. And then as soon as we make the observation that we've encountered such claims, somebody says, oh, come on, nobody really believes that. I cannot figure out what is going on in the extreme left in terms of good faith argumentation. It's almost like a giant prank that never ends.
In both of the articles, there seems to be quite a focus on Dave Rubin in particular. Why do you think that is, and what do you make of it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think we've all tried to figure out why we're going through this very bizarre time. I think Dave's view of how he is balancing his portfolio is that he's accepting a lot of very conservative gigs, for example, with Turning Point USA or PragerU, or going on Fox. And then his feeling is that he's balancing it by saying, hey, do you realize you guys just invited a gay man who smokes weed into your group? And kudos to that for being tolerant. So from his perspective, yeah, he's doing a lot of work with conservatives, but he's constantly reminding them that they are changing and that they are becoming more tolerant. If you like, his view, I think, is that he is making the right more liberal. Now, from a different perspective, and this is held by many people, he is choosing repeatedly to punch to the left and to accept right-wing speaking engagements, right of center speaking engagements. And so from that perspective, well, then he's just really much more on the right. And I think that he's agreed that he's moved right. I don't think that's a question. But I think it has to do with whether or not you view his balancing of this, which is, he's quite open about talking about being pro-choice at a conservative event. And that is a way in which he is actually taking the left to the right as he fights the part of the left that he thinks has taken the left down. And, I don't think he makes any bones about it. He doesn't think the left is ever coming back. I think he thinks the Democratic Party is finished. So, that's a debate that he and I have. I don't think the Democratic Party is finished. I think that we have to fight for its soul right now. And so that's what I think is sort of dividing people, is that Dave's rhetoric and Dave's strategy is different than my strategy. So, do I like Dave's strategy better than my strategy? No. I think he's doing something where he's, going on more conservative programs than I would feel comfortable with.
And one of the issues that I see is that a lot of the criticisms of the left, and I'm thinking particularly of Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson, possibly because they're repeated so often, they seem to be quite low resolution. And do you agree? And do you think we need higher resolution critiques of the left?
I think I'm going to be making higher resolution critiques of the left because I haven't given up on the left. If I were where they are, where they think this has just gone, metastatic and there's no saving it, I think it's understandable why they would move to a lower resolution picture. I think that the real fear that I have is much more on the right, that we had the right down to a couple of zealots with tiki torches, and now the far left is going to antagonize ordinary human beings to moving farther and farther right to escape an attack on reason and civility themselves. So I think that this is a stylistic difference. It's a difference in findings of fact. I think that I am much more optimistic that this will bounce back and that we're in a period of madness and that the madness can't continue forever. But if I thought the madness were going to continue forever, sure, I might just dismiss the whole thing.
And I guess by higher resolution critiques, what I'm also thinking about is, as far as I understand, people only generally change their minds, or even people only generally listen to you when you validate their experience in terms of, for example, to say to someone on the left, your concern about unfairness is a valid concern, but I'm also worried about how that can turn into an ideology that then doesn't admit, becomes very simplistic or whatever. I mean, that's what I would consider a more nuanced perspective. What would you say is the nuanced perspective that needs to be made?
Look, I've been trying to make this with Yuri to very little avail. He wants to say there's more to the position of the left than we are giving it credit for. My point is, I've always believed that, right? That the standard liberal left has a lot going for it. The progressive left, the traditional progressive left, has had a lot going for it. The new upgrade, to my mind, is where the real problems begin and end. And so what I'm really interested in is be hyper specific. What is it about the glee with which we are canceling people? We are terrifying people. We are coming after livelihood. We are trying to humiliate, shame, and embarrass people so that they are terrified to speak out relatively garden variety truths. And then when they express fear, we say, oh, come on, nobody believes those really radical things. Maybe it's a few college kids with green hair somewhere in the Northwest, but man, are you overreacting? I think this is what's coming across as gaslighting. I mean, when you say open borders, do you mean open borders? If you don't mean open borders, don't say open borders. If you mean open borders, let's play through the consequences of what you're talking about. You know, if you really believe that every deviation from the percentage in a population, are you really bothered by wage gaps? Is that really what's bothering you? Because I can tell you that in high fashion modeling, I think it favors women by like 10 to 1. So men are getting paid 10 cents on the dollar. I don't think anybody seriously cares about that except as an oddity. I don't think anybody's mystified as to why it's happened. The key problem is that we've adopted these very strange speech patterns, like hashtag kill all men. Well, what do you mean by hashtag kill all men? Oh, I just mean that it would be nicer if the world were a little better for women. Well, I don't know. It's some pattern of English usage that I think the appeal of it and the fun of it is to get grandpa to scratch his head and say, wow, kids today.